Certain truths were deliberately withheld, not as secrecy, but as protection. Not because they were dangerous, but because they are destabilizing when met too early. There are realizations that fracture identity if the inner structure is not ready to hold them. So the field waits. Silence is not absence. Silence is timing. What matters here is not what is being revealed, but when. Truth does not arrive because it is requested. It arrives when the frequency of the one encountering it can remain coherent in its presence. Until then, it stays invisible. Not hidden. Inaccessible. This is not punishment or hierarchy. This is intelligence. The idea that information should be available to anyone at any time misunderstands how reality functions. Reality is not a library. It is a mirror. And mirrors do not show what you want. They show what you are prepared to see without distortion. This is why some truths feel overwhelming, confusing, or even threatening when encountered too early. The system protects itself by delaying contact. This is where synchronicity enters. This message did not appear to you because of chance, algorithms, or curiosity. It appeared because something in you already stabilized enough to register it without collapsing into resistance or obsession. The mechanism is simple and exact. When inner coherence reaches a certain threshold, corresponding information becomes visible. Before that moment, the same message could exist in plain sight and remain unseen. This is not mysticism. It is resonance. Like tuning a receiver, you do not force the signal to arrive. You adjust the receiver until the signal is clear. The signal was always present. Only the tuning changed. Silence, then, is not withholding. It is calibration. The field does not rush revelation because rushing fractures integration. A truth that cannot be embodied becomes noise. A realization that cannot be lived becomes confusion. So reality waits until recognition can land softly, without urgency, without fear, without the need to prove or defend it. If you are here, it is not because you searched hard enough. It is because your frequency no longer rejects what is being reflected. The encounter itself is the evidence. Not the content. The timing. This reframes everything. You are not being told something forbidden. You are remembering something inevitable. The oath of silence was not broken. It expired. Not because someone decided you were worthy, but because your inner state no longer required protection from what you are about to recognize. Nothing is being added to you. Nothing is being granted. A layer of resistance simply dissolved, and what was always present became perceivable. This is how readiness feels. Quiet. Unceremonious. Certain. Do not rush ahead. Do not grasp for meaning. Let this land at the level it arrives. Recognition does not demand effort. It asks for stillness. If you are aligned with this frequency, subscribe and remain within it. Truth is not withheld because it is fragile. It withholds itself because you are. Not in weakness, but in sensitivity. The nervous system is the interface through which reality is interpreted, and when that system is overloaded, truth does not liberate. It destabilizes. There are realizations that dissolve identities faster than the body can recalibrate. When this happens, the system interprets insight as threat. Confusion, anxiety, dissociation, obsession, these are not failures of understanding. They are signals that revelation arrived before regulation. The field does not punish this. It compensates for it by delaying access next time. This is why readiness is not intellectual. You do not become ready by studying harder, thinking faster, or collecting more concepts. Those activities often increase instability rather than coherence. Readiness is a physiological state. It is the ability to remain present while perception reorganizes. It is the capacity to feel without spiraling, to notice without gripping, to allow without needing immediate certainty. The nervous system must be able to stay neutral in the presence of expansion. Not excited. Not fearful. Neutral. This neutrality is not emptiness. It is balance. When the system can remain balanced, insight no longer feels like an invasion. It feels like recognition. Premature revelation fractures identity because identity is not just an idea. It is a pattern of emotional expectations, habits, and survival strategies stored in the body. When truth arrives too fast, it dismantles these patterns without providing the stability to replace them. The result is disorientation. So the field waits until regulation is established first. This regulation is not something you force. It develops naturally through lived experience, emotional honesty, and the gradual release of resistance. When reactions soften, when urgency dissolves, when the need to control outcomes fades, the nervous system settles into coherence. Only then does deeper truth become useful rather than disruptive. This is why neutrality is the signal the field responds to. Neutrality tells the system, and reality itself, that integration is possible. Not excitement. Not intensity. Calm presence. When neutrality is present, truth no longer needs to protect you from itself. Effort does not accelerate this process. In fact, effort often delays it. Straining to understand tightens the system. Forcing insight creates internal pressure. The field reads this pressure as unreadiness and withholds accordingly. This is not judgment. It is precision. When regulation is present, truth arrives gently. It does not overwhelm. It reorganizes quietly. You do not feel compelled to announce it, defend it, or chase it. You simply recognize it and continue living from a slightly different orientation. This is the distinction most miss. Truth does not arrive when you want it. It arrives when your nervous system no longer needs protection from it. Like the video now as a confirmation that this recognition has landed. Curiosity feels innocent, but it carries a subtle tension. It leans forward. It wants to acquire. It assumes something is missing and must be obtained. This posture alone changes the signal. Wanting to know is not the same as being ready to recognize. Intellectual curiosity operates through pursuit. It gathers concepts, compares frameworks, seeks confirmation, and tries to assemble a larger picture. There is nothing wrong with this at the surface level, but it is not how deeper access occurs. Curiosity keeps the system slightly activated, slightly leaning, slightly reaching. That reach introduces interference. Initiation is different. Initiation does not come from wanting more information. It arrives when the need to know dissolves. When the system relaxes enough to stop scanning for answers, something shifts. Presence replaces pursuit. And in that stillness, what was previously inaccessible becomes obvious. This is the paradox. The more urgently you want clarity, the less available it becomes. Not because clarity is hiding, but because urgency tightens perception. A tightened system filters aggressively. It misses what does not fit its expectations. Initiation requires a wide aperture, not a narrow focus. Curiosity asks questions. Initiation answers none of them directly. Instead, it reorganizes the one asking. This is why initiation feels less like learning and more like remembering. Nothing new is added. Something unnecessary drops away. Seeking implies distance. It assumes truth is elsewhere, ahead, or withheld. Presence collapses distance. When presence stabilizes, the idea of access disappears because nothing feels separate enough to access. This is why initiation cannot be chased. Chasing reinforces separation. Allowance is the key distinction. Allowance is not passivity. It is a state of relaxed openness without expectation. In allowance, the system is not braced for impact or reward. It is receptive without leaning. This state carries a different frequency entirely. It signals readiness without demand. Initiation often arrives quietly. There is no dramatic moment, no internal announcement. One day, something that used to feel complex feels obvious. Something that once triggered seeking no longer pulls attention. The absence of urgency is the sign. Not certainty. Calm. This is also why many miss initiation when it happens. They expect fireworks. Instead, they encounter simplicity. And simplicity is easy to overlook if the mind is trained to value complexity. Initiation does not impress the intellect. It bypasses it. Wanting to know keeps the system oriented toward the future. Initiation anchors awareness in the present. When awareness rests here, without needing to move, reality can respond fully. The field does not open to pursuit. It opens to coherence. This is not a moral distinction. Curiosity is not wrong. It simply belongs to a different layer. Initiation begins when curiosity exhausts itself and gives way to stillness. When questions fall silent, not because they were answered, but because they no longer feel necessary. Access arises through allowance, not pursuit. When seeking ends, initiation has space to occur. Reality does not respond to what you say. It responds to what you are being. Experience is filtered through state, not language. Vibration comes first. Perception follows. Circumstance mirrors posture long before it reflects intention. This is why words alone carry no creative authority. Affirmations spoken from tension do not reprogram reality. They amplify the tension underneath. When words contradict emotional posture, the field follows the posture every time. Not because it ignores language, but because language is secondary. Emotional state is the true instruction. It is the background signal constantly being broadcast. Calm tells the field there is safety and coherence. Urgency signals lack. Control signals distrust. These signals are not judged. They are read and mirrored with precision. When affirmations fail, it is not because they are wrong. It is because the system delivering them is incoherent. Speaking abundance from contraction instructs the field to reflect contraction. Declaring peace while braced for disappointment instructs the field to confirm instability. The words are overridden by the state beneath them. This is why emotional posture governs perception before it governs outcome. Two people can experience the same circumstance and perceive entirely different realities. The difference is not intelligence or optimism. It is regulation. A regulated system perceives more options. A dysregulated system sees threats and obstacles. Control is the most common form of interference. Control tightens attention. It narrows perception. It creates a constant microtension that distorts incoming information. When control is present, the field appears resistant, chaotic, or delayed. Not because it is, but because the signal being sent is noisy. Stillness sharpens signal. When the system relaxes, perception widens. Subtle information becomes visible. Timing aligns naturally. This is not passive. It is precise. Stillness removes distortion so the mirror can reflect accurately. Trying to manage outcomes adds layers of instruction that contradict each other. Wanting certainty while fearing loss. Desiring expansion while bracing for disappointment. These mixed signals slow response, not as punishment, but as calibration. The field waits for clarity. Clarity does not mean confidence or excitement. It means coherence. A single signal. Calm presence without internal argument. In this state, words become unnecessary. The field already has the instruction. This is why effort rarely produces alignment. Effort implies strain. Strain implies lack. The field responds accordingly. When effort drops and presence stabilizes, response accelerates. Not because you tried harder, but because you stopped contradicting yourself. Stillness is not emptiness. It is alignment without noise. From this state, perception becomes accurate. You see what is actually available instead of what fear or desire filters in or out. Reality appears responsive because the signal is finally clean. The field has always been responding. The difference is whether you were broadcasting clearly or interfering with your own transmission. Emotion is not a reaction to reality. It is the instruction that tells reality how to respond. Before thought forms, before language shapes interpretation, emotion sets the frequency. This frequency determines what becomes visible, what feels possible, and what remains inaccessible. Most people relate to emotion as something that happens to them. A consequence. An inconvenience. Something to manage or override. But emotion is not passive. It is directional. It is the interface between inner state and external experience. The field reads emotion as signal, not as commentary. Expansion and contraction are not good or bad. They are feedback. Expansion signals alignment. It feels like ease, openness, quiet clarity. Contraction signals misalignment. It feels like tension, resistance, urgency, or heaviness. Neither is a mistake. Both are information. When expansion is present, access widens naturally. Perception sharpens. Synchronicity increases. When contraction is present, access narrows. This is not punishment. It is guidance. The system is indicating that something is being approached from the wrong angle or the wrong state. The problem begins when contraction is resisted or denied. Suppression does not remove contraction. It compounds it. When emotion is pushed away, the signal becomes distorted. The field receives mixed instructions. One part of the system is signaling discomfort. Another is pretending it is not there. The result is delay. Denial freezes access because it prevents refinement. Emotion must be felt to be informative. Not indulged. Not dramatized. Felt. When emotion is allowed without story, it completes its function. The signal adjusts. Alignment refines. This is why emotional honesty is more powerful than positivity. Pretending to feel expansive while contracted sends noise. The field responds to the contraction beneath the performance. Clarity requires coherence. Coherence requires truth at the emotional level. Emotion does not ask to be fixed. It asks to be acknowledged. Once acknowledged, it shifts naturally. Not through force, but through permission. This shift is subtle, but the field responds immediately. Access adjusts as the signal changes. Expansion is not excitement. Contraction is not failure. These distinctions matter. Excitement often carries instability. Calm expansion is the signal of alignment. Similarly, contraction does not mean you are off track. It means refinement is occurring. The system is adjusting orientation. When emotion is used as guidance instead of obstacle, navigation becomes effortless. You no longer need strategies. You feel your way into coherence. This is faster than thinking and more accurate than planning. Suppression delays access because it freezes the signal. Denial tells the field that awareness is fragmented. The field waits. When awareness becomes whole, access resumes. Emotion is the access code because it is always current. It cannot be faked convincingly. It cannot be bypassed. But it can be listened to. When listened to, it refines alignment with precision. Comment with the words "I am ready to anchor this timeline." Forcing understanding feels productive, but it carries a hidden distortion. It assumes that clarity is achieved through pressure. That insight arrives faster when intensity increases. This assumption alone fractures coherence. Urgency narrows perception. It tightens attention around a desired outcome and excludes everything that does not immediately confirm progress. In this narrowed state, the system becomes inefficient. It misses what is subtle, indirect, or quiet. And deeper understanding is always quiet. Awakening does not respond to pressure because pressure is a signal of lack. It broadcasts that something is missing and must be acquired quickly. The field mirrors this state by extending the sense of distance. Not to deny access, but to correct the signal. Intensity feels like movement, but it is often noise. The nervous system interprets urgency as threat, even when the mind labels it as motivation. In response, perception becomes defensive. It scans for certainty, not truth. It seeks reassurance, not recognition. This is why forcing understanding leads to more questions instead of clarity. Relaxed awareness operates differently. It does not chase resolution. It allows perception to widen. In this state, the system is not trying to extract meaning. It is available to receive it. This availability is what recognition responds to. Understanding arrives indirectly because it cannot be seized. The moment you try to grasp it, it reorganizes itself outside your grip. This is not evasion. It is structural. Insight emerges when resistance dissolves, not when effort increases. Pressure creates internal argument. One part of the system demands answers. Another braces for disappointment. This split introduces contradiction. The field waits for coherence before responding. When pressure releases, the split resolves. Signal clarity returns. Relaxation does not mean disengagement. It means removing excess effort. Attention becomes steady instead of sharp. Curiosity softens into presence. In this state, information no longer needs to announce itself. It simply becomes obvious. This is why recognition often happens when you are not trying. In moments of stillness. In pauses between seeking. When the system stops leaning forward, what was always present moves into view. Forcing understanding delays integration because it prioritizes speed over stability. Recognition cannot be rushed without being distorted. The field values coherence more than urgency. It responds when the system can hold what arrives without grasping or resisting. Letting go of pressure is not giving up. It is recalibrating the signal. When effort drops, awareness becomes spacious. When awareness is spacious, understanding has room to form naturally. The mind wants answers. Recognition wants space. When space is given, answers reorganize themselves without force. Understanding does not come to those who push hardest. It comes to those who stop interfering with their own perception. Nothing is created anywhere else but here. Not later. Not before. The present moment is the only point where reality can respond, reorganize, or reveal itself. Every other time reference is conceptual. Useful for planning, but irrelevant for access. Creation does not happen in memory. Memory is a recording, not an interface. It replays what has already passed through perception, filtered by emotion and interpretation. When attention is anchored there, perception collapses inward. The system is no longer receiving. It is reviewing. Revelation cannot occur in review. The same is true of anticipation. Anticipation projects attention forward, attempting to reach a moment that does not yet exist. This projection fragments awareness. One part of the system imagines a future state. Another waits to arrive there. This split creates delay. Revelation requires wholeness. The present moment is different. It has no internal division. There is no reaching and no retreating. Awareness is unified. In this unity, the system becomes receptive. Not because something special is done, but because nothing is being resisted or pursued. Memory distorts perception by reinforcing identity. It tells a story about who you have been, what has happened, and what should be expected. This story quietly filters what feels possible now. Anticipation distorts perception by demanding outcomes. It conditions awareness to scan for confirmation instead of clarity. Both memory and anticipation pull attention out of the only space where change can occur. They feel active, but they are disengaging from the field's point of response. The field does not respond to what was or what might be. It responds to what is being broadcast now. Revelation is not delivered across time. It is recognized in stillness. When attention rests fully in the present, perception widens. Subtle information becomes available. Connections form without effort. Understanding assembles itself without narrative. This is why insight often arrives when you stop thinking about it. When attention drops out of past and future, the system stops filtering. The mirror clears. What has always been present becomes visible. The present moment is not dramatic. It does not announce itself. It feels ordinary, which is why it is overlooked. But ordinariness is the signal of alignment. When there is no urgency to leave the moment, coherence stabilizes. Nothing new enters the present. What changes is what you can perceive within it. Layers of noise fall away. Distortion dissolves. The system stops bracing. In this state, revelation does not feel like an event. It feels like inevitability. You cannot carry insight from the past into now. You cannot borrow clarity from the future. Each moment stands alone as an access point. When attention fully inhabits it, creation responds immediately. This is why all paths eventually point here. Not as a destination, but as a condition. When now is occupied completely, nothing is withheld. Not because something is given, but because nothing is blocking perception. Revelation can only occur now because now is the only place you actually are. Identity is not who you think you are. It is the filter through which you are allowed to perceive. Long before personality traits or stories form, identity establishes boundaries of coherence. These boundaries decide what feels real, what feels impossible, and what never even registers. You do not see reality directly. You see what your identity can tolerate without destabilizing. This is not limitation by design flaw. It is regulation. Identity stabilizes experience by excluding information that would fracture coherence. Truth that exceeds identity capacity does not appear as false. It appears as invisible. This is why insight cannot exceed identity. Not because truth is withheld, but because perception is selective. The system prioritizes continuity over accuracy. It will preserve a familiar self-concept rather than allow a perception that would dismantle it too quickly. Identity is often mistaken for personality. Personality is expression. Identity is orientation. Personality can change easily. Identity shifts slowly. It is made of assumptions about what is possible, safe, deserved, and real. These assumptions are rarely conscious, yet they govern perception with precision. When a truth contradicts identity, it does not feel neutral. It feels threatening, confusing, or irrelevant. The mind may dismiss it, rationalize it, or never notice it at all. This is not denial. It is filtering. The system is maintaining coherence. As identity stabilizes at a new level, perception expands automatically. There is no effort involved. Suddenly, ideas that once felt abstract feel obvious. Experiences that once seemed inaccessible feel normal. Nothing changed externally. The filter shifted. This is why explaining truth rarely works. Language cannot override identity. You can hear words that describe a reality you cannot yet perceive. They pass through without landing. Not because they are wrong, but because there is no internal structure to receive them. Insight feels sudden because identity shifts often happen quietly. One assumption dissolves. One boundary softens. And perception reorganizes instantly. It appears as a breakthrough, but it was a recalibration. Trying to force insight without shifting identity creates tension. The system senses incompatibility. It tightens. Confusion increases. Clarity recedes. This is why effortful seeking stalls. It targets perception without addressing the filter. Identity coherence matters more than conceptual accuracy. A coherent identity with limited beliefs is more stable than an incoherent identity flooded with advanced concepts. The field respects stability. It waits for coherence before expanding access. As identity becomes less rigid, fewer truths feel threatening. The filter relaxes. Awareness widens. You do not become something new. You stop defending something old. This release allows perception to move beyond previous limits. This is why recognition feels natural when it arrives. Identity has already adjusted. The truth fits. There is no shock. No resistance. Just familiarity. What enters awareness is not determined by intelligence, effort, or desire. It is determined by what your identity can hold without breaking. As coherence deepens, access expands. Not because you reached higher, but because you stopped excluding what was already here. Recognition is not something you reach. It is something that becomes obvious when you stop trying to arrive. Awakening is not an achievement added to identity. It is the removal of effort that was obscuring what has always been present. Effort implies distance. It assumes there is a gap between where you are and what you are seeking. This assumption shapes perception. The system scans forward, looking for a future moment of clarity. In doing so, it overlooks what is already here. Clarity is not hidden. It is bypassed. This is why striving delays recognition. Not because effort is wrong, but because it points attention away from immediacy. When awareness is oriented toward becoming, it cannot fully inhabit being. Recognition requires inhabitation, not progress. Awakening feels passive because it is subtractive. Nothing is gained. Something unnecessary relaxes. The tension of searching releases. The compulsion to understand dissolves. In that release, perception clears. What remains was never absent. Resting in awareness does not mean disengaging from life. It means disengaging from the belief that something is missing. When that belief drops, attention settles naturally. There is no longer a need to manipulate experience into meaning. Recognition often arrives without drama. There is no internal announcement, no emotional spike. It feels ordinary, even anticlimactic. This ordinariness is the clue. What is recognized was never extraordinary. It was constant, but previously filtered out by effort. Effort creates layers. Each layer adds interpretation, expectation, and evaluation. These layers are not wrong, but they obscure direct perception. When effort relaxes, layers thin. Awareness becomes simple again. In simplicity, recognition is immediate. This is why awakening cannot be forced or scheduled. It is not produced by intensity. Intensity reinforces effort. Effort reinforces separation. Recognition collapses separation by removing the one who is trying to get somewhere. You do not recognize awareness by thinking about it. You recognize it by noticing what is present before thought moves. That noticing is not an action. It is a pause. In the pause, awareness reveals itself without needing confirmation. This does not make awakening passive in the sense of inactive. It makes it effortless. Life continues. Decisions happen. Movement occurs. But the internal pressure to arrive somewhere dissolves. Experience unfolds without commentary. Recognition stabilizes when you stop checking whether it has happened. The moment you evaluate, you reintroduce effort. The system leans forward again. Clarity blurs. This is not failure. It is habit. And habits soften with patience, not force. What was always present does not require maintenance. It requires permission. When permission is given, recognition sustains itself naturally. There is nothing to hold on to because nothing was added. Awakening is not something you do to yourself. It is what remains when you stop doing. You do not travel through timelines as if moving along a road. Timelines are not destinations you reach by effort or progression. They are fields of probability already available, and experience selects among them through vibration. You tune, and what matches responds. A timeline is not a future event waiting to arrive. It is a state already in motion, accessible when your internal signal aligns with it. This alignment has nothing to do with desire. Desire often introduces instability. It leans forward. It implies absence. The field does not respond to what you want. It responds to what you are consistently broadcasting. Emotional consistency is the tuning mechanism. Not intensity. Not visualization. Not hope. Consistency. The system selects outcomes that match its dominant state, not its temporary wishes. A calm, stable signal tunes to timelines that reflect coherence. A fluctuating signal tunes to instability, regardless of what the mind prefers. This is why effortful manifestation feels unreliable. Desire spikes, but identity and emotional baseline remain unchanged. The signal oscillates. The field receives mixed instructions. Response becomes inconsistent. Not because reality is slow, but because the tuning keeps shifting. Stability is the deciding factor. When emotional posture becomes steady, timelines reorganize quickly. This steadiness is not boredom or resignation. It is calm certainty. The absence of internal argument. When the system no longer swings between anticipation and disappointment, the signal becomes clear. You do not choose timelines by thinking about them. Thinking is too slow and too superficial. You tune to timelines through the state you repeatedly return to when nothing is happening. That baseline tells the field what is normal for you. The field responds by delivering more of what feels normal. This is why sudden breakthroughs often follow long periods of emotional neutrality. The signal finally stabilizes. The system stops contradicting itself. When contradiction ends, selection becomes precise. Desire alone does not move you because desire is unstable. It rises and falls. It carries urgency and expectation. These qualities distort tuning. Emotional consistency, on the other hand, does not need reinforcement. It persists quietly. It signals readiness without demand. When you understand this, waiting loses meaning. There is nothing to wait for. There is only tuning. If the timeline has not shifted, the signal has not stabilized yet. This is not failure. It is information. You do not jump timelines. You relax into them. When internal resistance dissolves, the path of least effort becomes visible. Movement feels natural, not forced. Circumstances rearrange without drama because they are no longer being pulled against. This also explains why outcomes often arrive unexpectedly. The mind was focused elsewhere, but the signal was clear. The field responded without needing permission from thought. Timelines respond to what you consistently embody, not what you occasionally want. When embodiment stabilizes, selection becomes effortless. You do not chase outcomes. You encounter the ones that match you. Tuning is not something you do once. It is something you maintain by returning to coherence again and again. As coherence becomes familiar, the timelines that match it become unavoidable. Waiting feels harmless, even patient, but it carries a precise signal. It implies separation. It assumes that what is desired exists somewhere else, at some later point, and that you are not yet the version of yourself that can inhabit it. This assumption alone broadcasts unreadiness. The field does not interpret waiting as humility or trust. It reads waiting as misalignment between state and outcome. Not because time is required, but because coherence is not yet complete. When coherence is present, distance collapses. When it is not, distance appears as delay. Waiting reinforces the idea that reality moves independently of you. That circumstances must catch up. That something external needs to change first. This posture places awareness outside of embodiment. You remain oriented toward a future self instead of inhabiting the one available now. Embodiment changes everything. When you embody a state, you no longer reference time. You do not look ahead to confirm arrival. You live from the assumption that what you are aligned with is already active. This does not mean pretending. It means stabilizing the emotional posture that matches the outcome. What is awaited already exists as a timeline responding to a particular state of being. The only variable is whether that state is being inhabited consistently. When it is not, waiting feels natural. When it is, waiting feels irrelevant. Postponement is subtle. It often disguises itself as patience, preparation, or caution. But beneath these justifications is hesitation. Hesitation signals uncertainty. Uncertainty fragments the signal. The field responds by maintaining separation until clarity returns. This is why clarity feels like immediacy. Not urgency, but presence. When you are fully present in a state, there is no sense of delay. Experience begins to reorganize around that presence because there is no longer contradiction. Waiting also keeps identity suspended. You remain in transition, neither here nor there. This suspension prevents stabilization. Stabilization is what the field responds to. Once stabilized, outcomes align naturally, often faster than expected. This does not mean forcing embodiment. Forced embodiment is performance, not coherence. It collapses under pressure. True embodiment feels calm. Unremarkable. It does not need reassurance. It does not check progress. When waiting dissolves, it is not replaced by expectation. It is replaced by normalcy. The state you once awaited becomes ordinary. From that ordinariness, response accelerates. The paradox is this: the moment you stop waiting, the reason for waiting disappears. Not because something arrived, but because separation ended. The field mirrors this immediately. Unreadiness is not failure. It is information. Waiting reveals where embodiment has not yet stabilized. When you see waiting clearly, you no longer judge it. You use it as guidance. There is nothing wrong with where you are. But nothing arrives while you are waiting for yourself to arrive. When embodiment replaces postponement, distance collapses without effort. What you are waiting for is not in the future. It is already responding to who you are willing to be now. Calm certainty is not an emotion you generate. It is a state that remains when emotional noise settles. It does not push. It does not hope. It does not brace. It simply knows without needing reinforcement. This is the state the field responds to most precisely. Excitement feels powerful, but it is unstable. It spikes and crashes. It carries anticipation and attachment. Urgency feels motivating, but it fragments attention. Hope feels gentle, but it implies lack. Each of these states sends a mixed signal. One part of the system leans forward. Another waits to be proven right. The field mirrors the inconsistency. Calm certainty carries no such contradiction. There is no internal argument. No checking. No leaning. The system is settled. This settledness is not passive. It is coherent. And coherence is magnetic. The field organizes itself around stable signals. Not loud ones. Not emotional ones. Stable ones. Calm certainty tells the field that the system can hold what is being reflected. There is no rush because there is no doubt. There is no grasping because there is no sense of absence. Neutrality is often misunderstood here. Neutrality does not mean indifference. It means non-resistance. It is the absence of internal friction. When neutrality is present, perception is clear. Action becomes effortless. Outcomes align without being chased. Quiet knowing is not confidence in the conventional sense. Confidence often seeks confirmation. Quiet knowing does not. It does not need evidence to sustain itself. It is internally complete. This completeness is what collapses delay. When the system rests in calm certainty, it stops sending corrective signals. There is no oscillation between wanting and fearing. No emotional negotiation with the future. The field reads this as readiness and responds immediately. This is why some outcomes arrive suddenly after long periods of nothing happening. The external circumstances did not change first. The internal state stabilized. Once stabilized, organization followed naturally. Excitement and urgency attempt to pull reality toward you. Calm certainty allows reality to move toward coherence. One creates resistance. The other removes it. The difference is subtle but decisive. Calm certainty also does not announce itself. It feels ordinary. Almost boring to the mind that craves stimulation. But boredom here is not emptiness. It is the absence of tension. In that absence, alignment locks in. The field does not respond faster to stronger emotion. It responds faster to cleaner signals. Clean signals come from internal alignment, not intensity. When emotional spikes settle into steady presence, the response becomes reliable. You do not need to maintain calm certainty through effort. Effort introduces strain. Calm certainty emerges naturally when you stop contradicting yourself. When desire softens into acceptance. When urgency dissolves into presence. This is the state that allows things to unfold without drama. Without force. Without delay. Not because you demanded it, but because there was nothing in the way. The field responds to calm certainty because calm certainty leaves it no reason not to. This movement is not about learning something new. It is about remembering what was never lost. Nothing here is being taught. Teaching implies distance, hierarchy, and transfer. What is happening instead is recognition, where something already present comes back into awareness without needing explanation. This is why language eventually fails. Words are tools for pointing, not for containing. They can gesture toward truth, but they cannot hold it. The moment truth is reduced to explanation, it becomes smaller than it is. It turns into concept. And concepts always feel foreign compared to recognition. Truth feels familiar because it is not introduced. It is recalled. When recognition occurs, there is often a quiet sense of having always known. Not intellectually, but somatically. The body relaxes. Resistance drops. There is no surprise, only confirmation. This familiarity is the signature. Explanation creates distance. It places truth outside the listener and offers a bridge to cross. Remembrance collapses distance. There is no bridge because there was never separation. This is why explanation reaches a limit. Beyond that limit, silence becomes more accurate than words. The mind wants structure. It wants definitions, frameworks, and clarity that can be repeated. But truth does not repeat itself cleanly. It adapts to the listener's state. What is obvious to one feels meaningless to another. Not because truth changes, but because perception does. This is why this was never meant to be explained. Explanation assumes a static receiver. Reality knows better. It responds to coherence, not comprehension. When coherence is present, explanation becomes unnecessary. When it is absent, explanation becomes ineffective. Truth does not persuade. It resonates. It does not argue its case. It reveals itself when resistance softens. This revelation cannot be forced into language without distortion. The moment you try to package it, it becomes something else. The familiarity of truth is unsettling to the mind that expects novelty. It feels too simple. Too obvious. The mind looks for complexity because complexity feels earned. But truth does not reward effort. It responds to availability. This is why those who encounter recognition often struggle to explain it afterward. Not because they lack intelligence, but because explanation requires reducing the experience into symbols. Something essential is always lost in that reduction. What remains consistent is the feeling. A quiet alignment. A sense of being at home in awareness. This cannot be transmitted verbally. It must be noticed internally. Words can only clear the space for noticing. Remembrance does not accumulate. It strips away. Each layer removed brings perception closer to what has always been present. There is no final explanation waiting at the end. There is only increasing simplicity. This is also why debates around truth go nowhere. Those debating are operating at the level of explanation, not recognition. They are comparing maps, not standing in the territory. Recognition does not argue. It rests. You are not meant to understand this in the way you understand information. You are meant to recognize it in the way you recognize yourself. When that happens, explanation feels unnecessary, almost intrusive. This was never meant to be explained because what is being pointed to does not live in language. It lives in awareness. When awareness turns toward itself, nothing needs to be said. You have been approaching this as if something external were delivering insight to you. As if truth arrives from outside, through messages, teachers, or transmissions. This assumption is subtle, but it shapes everything. And it is the final illusion to dissolve. You are not the receiver of truth. You are the source from which recognition arises. Nothing you have encountered here came from elsewhere. It did not travel to you. It did not enter you. What happened was a reversal of attention. Awareness turned back toward itself, and in that turn, the idea of an external source collapsed. This is the identity inversion. The moment where the one seeking realizes there was never anything outside to receive. Consciousness was not waiting to be filled. It was waiting to notice itself without intermediaries. External authority dissolves naturally here. Not through rebellion, but through irrelevance. Teachers, systems, and explanations fall away because they are no longer needed. Not because they were wrong, but because their role was transitional. They pointed until pointing was no longer necessary. This does not elevate you above others. It removes hierarchy entirely. There is no higher position to occupy. There is only the absence of the one who thought it needed guidance. What remains is awareness recognizing its own activity. The mind often resists this moment. It wants to keep something to follow, something to reference. Letting go of external authority can feel disorienting at first. But that disorientation is brief. What replaces it is stability. A quiet certainty that does not depend on validation. When you recognize yourself as the source, seeking ends automatically. Not because you decided to stop, but because there is nowhere left to go. Every question collapses back into the one asking. And in that collapse, clarity emerges without effort. This is not solipsism. It is not the belief that only you exist. It is the recognition that what you are is not contained within a personal identity at all. The personal sense of self becomes a functional expression, not the center. Authority returns inward not as control, but as responsibility. You no longer outsource recognition. You no longer wait for permission to trust what is obvious. Discernment becomes natural because it is no longer filtered through insecurity. Nothing is lost here. Curiosity remains. Wonder remains. Engagement remains. What dissolves is dependence. The need for confirmation. The habit of looking outward for completion. This is why this stage feels quiet. There is no announcement. No declaration. No milestone to mark. Life continues, but it is no longer framed as a path towards something else. It is lived from itself. When intermediaries fall away, nothing replaces them. And that is the point. There was never meant to be a replacement. Consciousness does not need a representative. You were never meant to receive this as information. You were meant to recognize yourself as the one in which all information appears. This recognition does not make you special. It makes you ordinary in the deepest sense. Ordinary as awareness itself. Present. Unmediated. Complete. Nothing is arriving. Nothing is missing. The source you were waiting for has always been here, looking through your eyes. The silence was never a barrier. It was a condition. It existed only as long as it was needed. And now, without effort or announcement, it ends. Nothing dramatic marks this moment. There is no unveiling, no final piece handed over. That is how you know it is complete. When something truly arrives, it does not demand attention. It settles. It feels resolved. The pull forward dissolves because there is nowhere left to go. Silence ends naturally when readiness stabilizes. Not when questions are exhausted, but when the need for answers falls away. Not when certainty is achieved, but when uncertainty no longer threatens coherence. This is how completion feels. Quiet. Grounded. Self-contained. Nothing more is being withheld because nothing more is required. Withholding was never about control or secrecy. It was about protection. Protection from fragmentation. Protection from overload. Protection from premature contact with what could not yet be integrated. That function has now finished. This is why there is no instruction here. Instruction implies continuation. A next step. A direction to follow. Completion does not point forward. It rests. It does not motivate. It stabilizes. If you notice the absence of urgency, that is the signal. If you feel no need to chase the next idea, that is the confirmation. The system is no longer leaning. Awareness has settled into itself without effort. This does not mean life stops moving. It means movement is no longer driven by lack. Action continues, but without internal pressure. Choices are made without needing to justify them. Experience unfolds without commentary. The oath ends here because there is no longer anything to guard. Silence no longer serves a function. What remains does not need protection. It is stable enough to exist openly, quietly, without distortion. There is also nothing to hold on to from this point. No concept to preserve. No realization to defend. What has integrated does not require memory. It expresses itself naturally through how you relate, how you respond, how you remain. Completion is often mistaken for an ending. It is not. It is the absence of unfinished business. The absence of seeking. The absence of resistance. From this absence, life continues unimpeded. If there is a sense of simplicity here, trust it. Complexity belongs to the phase of adjustment. Simplicity belongs to integration. This simplicity is not fragile. It is resilient. You do not need to remember everything that was said. What mattered was never the sequence of ideas. What mattered was the state that allowed recognition to occur. That state remains without effort. The oath ends not because something was revealed, but because nothing needs to be hidden anymore. If this recognition is clear, subscribe and share this with someone who needs to hear it before their timeline closes.